The humid air in the ballroom clings to my skin, heavy with the scent of expensive cologne and the cloying sweetness of champagne. Crystal glasses chime like distant, mournful bells. A single spotlight finds him at the podium. My father. He stands there, bathed in the warm glow, a titan of industry stepping down. His smile is wide, practiced, a mask I've seen 1,000 times. It falters only slightly as he scans the crowd, his gaze sweeping over me without truly seeing. Not seeing what's coming. He clears his throat, the sound amplified, filling the hushed room. The words he speaks are smooth, resonant. He talks of legacy, of dedication, of building something grand from nothing. His voice swells with emotion as he reaches the part everyone anticipated, the part he rehearses in his mind, I'm sure. And truly, he says, his voice thick with what sounds like genuine pride, I owe my success, my every achievement, not just to the incredible team around me, but to my family, to my wife, Eleanor, my rock, a polite ripple of applause for my mother, elegant and poised by his side, her own smile serene. And to my sons, to Thomas, who found his own path with such courage, that's my brother, the artist, the one who escaped. And to Mark, whose unwavering support, his belief in me, has been a constant source of strength. My name, Mark. He says it, and it hangs in the air. Unwavering support. Belief in him. A bitter laugh catches in my throat, a silent, internal cough. He actually says it. He stands there, under the lights, surrounded by everyone who matters in this world he built, and he spins the narrative. My unwavering support. My belief in him. He doesn't know. Not yet. The words settle, a warm blanket of familial love and corporate gratitude. The crowd is smiling, nodding. They buy it. They always buy the performance. He steps back from the podium, basking in the sustained applause, a king descending from his throne. This is his moment, his victory lap. But the air shifts. A different kind of energy enters the room. The applause begins to fade, replaced by a low murmur as Chairman Thompson, austere and unsmiling, approaches the microphone. The transition is seamless, professional. The smile is wiped clean from my father's face, replaced by a slight frown of confusion. This wasn't in the script. Not his script. Thompson taps the microphone. The low feedback hums. My heart, which has been a frozen block in my chest for months, begins to pound. This is it. The culmination. The years of silent battle, of suffocating under his shadow, under his supposed guidance that was nothing but calculated obstruction. It all leads here, to this single, agonizing breath I hold. Ladies and gentlemen, Thompson's voice is crisp, businesslike. As we bid a fond farewell to a legend, the company must look to the future. My father's eyes narrow slightly. He probably thinks it's about the new 5-year plan, the strategic direction he laid out, the one designed to solidify his legacy and sideline. Well, sideline people like me. Thompson continues, his gaze sweeping the room, stopping directly on me. The spotlight follows his eyes, leaving my father in the relative dimness near the podium and pinning me where I stand, just inside the entrance of the ballroom, a ghost suddenly made solid. After a rigorous search, and with the unanimous approval of the board, Thompson pauses, letting the weight of the words sink in. The murmur in the crowd swells again, this time with curiosity, with surprise. My father shifts, looking at Thompson, then back at me, his frown deepening. He still doesn't grasp it. We are proud to announce the individual who will lead this company into its next chapter. Effective immediately, your new Chief Executive Officer. Thompson smiles, a small, tight, knowing smile directed at me. Mark Davison. The name hits the room like a physical shockwave. Silence. A deafening, absolute silence that swallows the music, the murmurs, the clinking glasses. Every eye swings from Thompson, to me, then to my father. My father. His face. The blood drains from it instantly. The practiced smile shatters, replaced by something raw, uncomprehending. His eyes, just moments ago filled with genial pride, are wide with disbelief, with horror, with utter, absolute shock. His mouth hangs open slightly. He freezes, a statue carved in the moment of his complete and total undoing. The spotlight holds me. I don't move. I don't smile. My expression is carefully neutral. A lifetime of carefully constructed composure. I just look back at him. My father. The man who owed his success to his sons. The man who never saw this coming. The silence stretches, long and terrible. It feels like an eternity. It feels like just the blink of an eye. If you've ever felt this way, if you've ever been blindsided by betrayal or felt the cold satisfaction of turning the tables on someone who thought they had you beaten, tell me in the comments. I read all of them. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. He had built this company, brick by painstaking brick. I grew up in the shadow of its glass towers, the hum of its servers, the relentless rhythm of its quarterly reports. As a child, visiting his office felt like stepping into a cathedral of power. The polished wood, the hushed tones of his assistants, the panoramic view of the city stretching out below, it all spoke of importance, of a world where decisions were made, where futures were forged. My father, the architect of it all, was a god in this pantheon. His desk was massive, covered in neat stacks of paper, a fortress of mahogany. He'd sit there, tie loosened, a slight smile playing on his lips as he talked about deals closed, markets conquered. He'd tell me stories, not fairy tales, but corporate sagas, tales of cunning and strategy, of overcoming rivals. He'd point out the window at other buildings and explain how he'd outmaneuvered the people inside them. He always talked about legacy. Not just his own, but our legacy. The family name etched onto the company's history. It wasn't just about him. It was about continuity. About building something that would last, something his sons could inherit, shape, and take to even greater heights. Or so I thought. So he led me to believe. From a young age, the path seemed clear, laid out by his subtle nudges and not-so-subtle expectations. Business school, summer internships in different departments of the company, networking events where he'd introduce me with a proud hand on my shoulder, saying, "This is Mark. He's going to be running things one day." The air in those rooms was thick with ambition, with the scent of cigars and success. I breathed it in. I believed it. I wanted it. Not just because it was expected, but because I genuinely saw the potential, the complexity, the challenge of it all. I felt a connection to the company, to its history, to the idea of steering that massive ship. After graduating, I started at the bottom, or as close to the bottom as his son could realistically start, an analyst position anonymous enough, but with the understanding that I would move up, learn the ropes, prove myself. And I did. I worked harder than anyone. Longer hours, taking on the grunt work, saying yes to every impossible deadline. I wanted to earn it. To show him and everyone else that I wasn't just the boss's son, but a capable professional in my own right. He offered advice, sometimes solicited, sometimes not. It was always delivered with the air of a wise mentor passing down ancient secrets. Watch your back, Mark. This world is full of snakes. Never show weakness, always have an angle. I absorbed it all, thinking it was tough love, the kind of lessons a father imparts to prepare his son for the real world, especially the cutthroat world of corporate power. My first few years were a blur of reports, presentations, and climbing the lower rungs. I got promoted steadily, each step feeling earned. I was good at it. I had a knack for seeing the patterns, for anticipating market shifts, for cutting through the noise. My father would occasionally offer a nod of approval, a brief, "Good job, son." That meant the world. I felt like I was on track, following the map he'd laid out, heading towards that promised future where I would sit in that big chair. The normal life wasn't perfect, but it felt purposeful, building towards a destiny I believed was shared. The disruption began subtly, a tremor before the earthquake. I'd been working on a major project for nearly a year, something with the potential to significantly boost profits and expand into a new market. I poured everything into it, Sleepless nights, missed weekends, the kind of dedication you give when you believe in something completely. It was my chance to prove I was ready for the next level. My direct manager, a man who'd always championed my work, put me up for a promotion to senior vice president, a position that would put me in charge of a key division and give me real strategic influence. It felt like the natural progression, the next step on the path my father had seemingly paved for me. The interviews went well. I felt confident. The board members seemed impressed. My father, when I mentioned it, gave a vague smile and said, "Just your best, son. These things are never guaranteed." I took it as typical fatherly caution, a way to manage expectations. Then came the news. I didn't get the promotion. They hired someone from outside the company, someone with less experience in our specific industry, someone I'd never even heard of before. The official explanation was convoluted, something about needing fresh perspective and diverse experience. It felt hollow. My manager was baffled. He told me, off the record, that I was the clear frontrunner, that my qualifications and performance were exemplary. He couldn't understand what had happened. Neither could I. It was the first time the path felt blocked, not just challenging, but actively obstructed. I went to my father, confused, hurt. I expected him to be angry, to go to bat for me, to use his influence. He was, after all, still the CEO. He listened patiently, nodding. Then he said, "Sometimes, Mark, the board wants their own person. It's political. Don't take it personally. Your time will come." His calm dismissal felt colder than any outright anger. Don't take it personally? My career, my future, the legacy he'd hammered into my head since I was a child. That wasn't personal? His reaction, or lack thereof, was the first crack in the foundation of my belief in him, in the shared destiny. It was the inciting incident. The moment the comfortable world tilted. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. The early struggles weren't just about that missed promotion. It was about the insidious shift that followed. Suddenly, projects I spearheaded faced inexplicable delays. Resources I needed were diverted elsewhere. My ideas, once welcomed, were met with polite skepticism or outright dismissal in meetings. The energy around me changed. People who had been friendly, collegial, became reserved, cautious. Whispers followed me down the hallway. I tried harder. I put in more hours. I redoubled my efforts, thinking I just needed to prove myself more. Maybe I hadn't been ready. Maybe my father was right, it was just politics, and I needed to play the game better. I sought his advice again more frequently now. He was always available, always willing to listen, always ready with a platitude. Persistence is key, Mark. Navigate the bureaucracy. Find allies. His advice was generic, useless. It led nowhere. I felt like I was running in place, pushing against an invisible wall. Every step forward was met with resistance. It wasn't just bad luck, it felt deliberate. Someone somewhere was making sure I didn't advance. I watched as others around me, less experienced, less qualified, were given opportunities, promoted past me. The sting of the first missed promotion faded, replaced by a dull, constant ache of frustration and suspicion. I started questioning everyone, scanning faces in meetings for signs of hostility, trying to decipher coded glances. One afternoon, I overheard two senior managers talking quietly near the elevators. They stopped abruptly when they saw me, their faces paling. Later, one of them, a kind older woman who'd been with the company for decades and had watched me grow up, pulled me aside. She looked nervous. "Mark," she whispered, glancing around. "Be careful." "Careful of what?" I asked, my voice low. She hesitated, wringing her hands. This isn't about your work, dear. You're good. Very good. But there's talk. From the top." The top? My blood ran cold. My father was the top. She nodded, her eyes full of sympathy and fear. "Heard things. About you not being the right fit anymore. For the future. Plans changing." She wouldn't say more. She just squeezed my arm and hurried away. The air left my lungs. Plans changing. He had plans. For the future. A future that apparently didn't include me running the company he'd built, the legacy he'd promised. The invisible wall wasn't just there, it was being actively maintained, reinforced from the top. For my father, the suspicion solidified into a horrifying possibility. The early struggles revealed their source. The possibility gnawed at me, festering. It felt impossible.
Why?
Why would he do this? Why lead me down this path my entire life, only to block it at the crucial moment? The man who talked about family, about legacy, about me leading the company one day. Was it all a lie? A performance? Was I a threat?
To what?
To him. The challenges escalated. My division's budget was slashed without explanation. Key personnel were transferred out from under me. My projects were micromanaged to death. Every decision second-guessed. Every initiative stifled. It felt like I was being systematically dismantled, my ability to perform crippled. I felt increasingly isolated. The people I thought were allies became distant. My phone calls went unanswered. Emails were ignored. I was a pariah, a persona non grata, in the very company that bore my family name. The whispers turned into open snickers when I walked by. The atmosphere was thick with schadenfreude. Everyone seemed to sense my downfall, the impending failure I couldn't escape. My father remained the picture of paternal concern. He'd invite me to lunch, ask how things were going, listen with that same patient, unreadable expression. I tried to push him, to ask directly about the obstacles, the rumors. He'd deflect, offering more useless platitudes, talking about navigating challenges, about the importance of resilience. It was like talking to a wall. A smiling, benevolent wall that was actively crushing me. The mask of concern was almost worse than open hostility. It was a performance, a lie, layered on top of the deeper betrayal. It confirmed the whispers, the fear. This wasn't happening despite him, it was happening because of him. The pressure was immense. I felt the weight of expectation, my own, my mother's, the ghost of the man I thought my father was. Failure wasn't just personal, it was public, humiliating. The company was my identity, the shared dream. And that dream was turning into a nightmare. I started coming home late, exhausted, defeated. My mother noticed. She asked what was wrong. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth, the sickening suspicion that her husband, our father, was systematically destroying my career, my future, my connection to the world he supposedly built for us. It felt too monstrous to articulate. The walls continued to close in. A major project I was leading was abruptly canceled, citing strategic realignment. The real reason, leaked to me by a sympathetic source, was that the decision came directly from the top, from my father, who overruled everyone to kill it. That was the final straw. The confirmation I dreaded. He wasn't just not helping me, he was actively, ruthlessly working against me. Everything seemed lost. The future I had worked towards for decades was gone. The company felt poisoned. The man I admired, the man I loved, was a stranger, a betrayer. The pain of the professional failure was immense, but the pain of the personal betrayal, of the shattered image of my father, was soul-crushing. I considered quitting, walking away from it all. The thought was tempting, a release from the suffocating pressure. But then what? What would I tell everyone? How would I explain the collapse of a career that was supposed to be guaranteed? More importantly, how would I live with the knowledge that he had won, that his betrayal had succeeded? The deepening crisis was complete. There seemed to be no way out. I sat alone in my office late one night. The city lights spread out below, a stark, cold panorama. My father's view. The room was silent except for the hum of my computer. On the screen was a document, a confidential memo I'd managed to obtain through that sympathetic source, buried deep in the company's internal network. It wasn't a smoking gun, not outright proof of his direct order to sideline me, but it was a key piece of the puzzle. It detailed the criteria for the recent senior VP promotion, the one I missed. The criteria had been subtly but decisively changed after my application was submitted, weighting skills I specifically didn't have significant experience in, while de-emphasizing my strengths. and the memo authorizing the change had been signed by a deputy, but bore a handwritten note in the margin, a note with my father's distinctive, spiky handwriting. Per my discussion with Thompson, ensure best fit for new direction. New direction, my non-fit for the new direction. It wasn't just bad luck. It was engineered, calculated, a deliberate, cold act of sabotage. The kind of move he used to boast about making against rivals. Now he was making it against his own son. The pain was still there, a dull throb in my chest, but something else was starting to surface. Anger. A cold, pure, burning rage that cleansed the pain. He had played me, led me on for years, built me up, only to tear me down. He thought he was clearing the path for whoever he did want, or simply ensuring that he remained the undisputed figurehead, even in retirement, pulling the strings from behind the scenes. He thought I would quit, disappear, leave the field clear. But staring at that spiky handwriting, something shifted inside me. The thought of walking away, of letting him win, became unbearable. He wanted me gone? He wanted to erase me from the future of the company he'd built? Not on my watch. Not after everything. I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. Confrontation was what he expected. He was a master manipulator. He'd twist it, deny it, turn it back on me. He'd make me look emotional, unstable. No. I needed a different strategy. His strategy. Cunning. Calculated. Quiet. He thought he had me beaten. He thought he had already written my ending. But he had underestimated me. He had underestimated the lessons he himself had taught me. Watch your back. Never show weakness. Always have an angle. He had shown me how to play the game, the brutal, no-holds-barred game of power. And now I would play it against him. My focus shifted. Instead of trying to succeed within his system, I started to understand the system itself. I began digging, quietly, methodically. I reviewed past board minutes, financial reports, internal communications. I looked for patterns, for vulnerabilities. I identified key players on the board who might not be completely loyal to my father, who might resent his autocratic style, his planned continued influence. Chairman Thompson, for one. He was old school, valued stability and competence, and had always seemed reserved around my father. I started having discreet conversations, planting seeds of doubt, asking innocent-sounding questions that hinted at inconsistencies, at potential risks associated with the new direction my father was subtly pushing. I didn't make accusations. I just presented information, letting them draw their own conclusions. I used the paper trail I was finding, the memos, the reports, the subtle shifts in strategy that benefited his preferred candidates or undermined my own division. The turning point wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was the quiet, cold resolution that formed in the pit of my stomach. I would not be defeated. I would use his own tactics against him. I would turn his planned humiliation into my unexpected triumph. I decided I wasn't just fighting for my career anymore. I was fighting for the truth, for vindication, for the right to stand on my own 2 feet in the place he tried to bury me. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun, in the shadows, with a cold, relentless determination. The days and weeks leading up to the retirement party were a blur of carefully orchestrated moves. While my father was focused on his legacy, his speeches, his triumphant exit, I was working in the quiet spaces, the corners he no longer paid attention to. I met with key board members individually, presenting them with my analysis of the company's performance over the past year, highlighting the projects that had stalled, the divisions that were floundering after I'd been sidelined, contrasting it with the success I'd had before the interference. I showed them the patterns of resource diversion, the questionable strategic choices that had been made. I didn't name names often, I just showed the data, the impact on the bottom line. I let the implications hang in the air. I also presented them with my vision for the future. A clear, concise plan that addressed the company's weaknesses and leveraged its strengths. A plan rooted in the deep understanding I had gained over years of hands-on work, the very work my father had tried to undermine. My plan was solid, well-researched, and promised a return to profitability and stability that the board desperately wanted. I didn't mention my father directly, not as a betrayer. I simply presented the narrative of a company drifting, of opportunities missed, and a clear path forward. But the unspoken contrast was obvious. His new direction had been detrimental. My proposed direction offered salvation. The final piece was leveraging the evidence of the manipulation. I didn't need to prove he sabotaged me specifically, not in a way that would cause a messy public scandal. I just needed to show the board that his judgment had become compromised, that his decisions weren't always in the company's best interest, that his methods were less than transparent. The memo with his handwriting on it, authorizing the criteria change that had blocked me, was presented not as proof of personal betrayal, but as an example of questionable decision-making processes happening behind the scenes. It raised questions about control, about who was really making decisions, about accountability. Thompson, in particular, listened intently. He was a man of order, of process. The idea that decisions were being made based on personal agendas, even by the CEO, went against everything he stood for. He saw the risk to the company's reputation, the instability it created. He saw a clear alternative in me, someone who understood the company inside and out, who had a viable plan and who, crucially, had been unfairly held back, suggesting competence despite the obstacles. My father, meanwhile, was oblivious. He was too busy preparing for his grand exit, securing his legacy, probably confident that he had neutralized any potential threat, that I was a non-factor. He saw me at home, distant and withdrawn, and likely interpreted it as defeat, as me licking my wounds. He had no idea that I was using that perceived withdrawal as cover, operating silently, strategically. The rising challenges had pushed me to the brink. The deepening crisis had shown me the true depth of his deception. But they had also forged me, hardened me, and forced me to learn the game at its highest, most brutal level. I didn't just survive. I learned how to fight back on ground of my own choosing, using weapons he never expected me to wield. I was no longer the son seeking approval. I was a contender, operating with a cold focus he hadn't anticipated. I was ready for the climax. The seconds stretched into an eternity after Thompson announced my name. The silence in the ballroom was thick enough to choke on. Every eye was on my father. He hadn't moved. He was still frozen by the podium, the benevolent CEO persona completely gone, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His mouth was still slightly open, his eyes wide and fixed on me, standing across the room, illuminated by the shifted spotlight. It was like watching a clock stop. The air hummed with unspoken questions. What? Him? Devisoesson? What about the succession plan? What about the new direction? What about everything we thought was happening? Then, slowly, agonizingly, his expression began to change. Disbelief melted into confusion, then into something dark and ugly, dawning comprehension, followed by rage. His eyes narrowed, burning into mine. He didn't see his son standing there. He saw a usurper, a traitor, the ultimate, unexpected threat he thought he had eliminated. He took a step forward, his hand reaching out slightly, a pathetic, aborted gesture. He looked like he was going to say something, yell something, demand an explanation. But no sound came out. His carefully constructed world had just imploded, live, in front of hundreds of people who had come to celebrate his triumph. Chairman Thompson stood calmly at the podium, allowing the moment to play out, the silent drama to unfold. He was a seasoned operator. He understood the power of this silence, this visual confirmation of a shift. Slowly, deliberately, I took a step forward. Then another. The spotlight followed me as I began to walk across the ballroom, through the stunned silence, towards the podium. I didn't rush. I moved with a quiet confidence, every step measured, every breath steady. The years of frustration, of pain, of silent struggle culminated in this walk. As I approached, I could see the veins standing out on my father's temples. His face was contorted, a mask of fury and humiliation. He looked like he wanted to lunge at me. I reached the podium, standing shoulder to shoulder with Thompson. My father was forced to step back slightly, retreating from the center of attention, his own space invaded. He was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling rapidly. He didn't look at Thompson, didn't look at my mother, who was now staring at him with dawning horror.
He only looked at me.
Thompson quietly stepped away from the microphone. It was mine now. I looked out at the crowd. Faces blurred by shock, confusion, curiosity. Then I looked at my father, standing there, defeated, blindsided, exposed. His plan had backfired spectacular. He had underestimated me one last time. I leaned into the microphone. The sound of my breath was loud in the sudden quiet. I could feel the heat from the spotlight, the weight of countless eyes. And I could feel the cold satisfaction settling deep within me. "Thank you, Chairman Thompson," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the room. I didn't look at my father as I said the words. "It's an honor to accept the position of CEO." I paused, letting that sink in. My father made a small, choked sound, like a gasp. "My father," I began, and I finally turned to face him, meeting his furious, shattered gaze. I kept my expression neutral, betraying nothing. My father built an incredible company. He laid the foundation for its success, it wasn't a lie. He had. But he had also tried to ensure I wasn't part of that success. I held his gaze. The noise in the room was starting to pick up, a nervous chatter, like the first drops of rain before a storm. But my attention was solely on him. "He taught me many things," I continued, my voice gaining a subtle edge, quiet but sharp. "About this business. About leadership. About strategy. About navigating challenges." The word challenges hung in the air, loaded with years of hidden meaning. His face contorted further. He knew. He knew I wasn't just accepting the job. I was acknowledging the battle, the one he thought he had won. He saw the quiet strength he had tried to break, the resilience he had inadvertently forged in me. He saw his own methods turned against him. "His legacy is undeniable," I said, my voice softer now, but no less firm. "And I intend to build upon it, taking this company into a future of transparency, integrity, and shared success." Transparency. Integrity. The words were a direct accusation, a silent condemnation of his methods, his betrayal. He couldn't stand it anymore. With a strangled noise that was half growl, half sob, he turned abruptly and pushed past my mother, stumbling slightly as he hurried towards the nearest exit, the crowd parting for him as if he were suddenly contagious. The spotlight remained on me. The climax wasn't a shout, a physical fight. It was that walk across the room, those quiet, loaded words, and his broken, public retreat. He came to celebrate his victory, his control, his expected narrative. Instead, he witnessed his own unexpected downfall, orchestrated by the son he underestimated and betrayed. He was blindsided, and I stood in the light, the victor in a war he didn't realize he had lost until the final blow was struck. The immediate aftermath was a surreal whirlwind. The stunned silence didn't last long. It broke into a clamor, whispers, gasps, confused exclamations. People surged forward, some to congratulate me, their faces a mixture of awe and calculation, others to ask bewildered questions, their eyes darting towards the exit my father had fled through. Chairman Thompson shook my hand firmly, a brief nod acknowledging the unspoken understanding between us. My mother approached, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock and distress. She looked from the empty space where my father had been to me, her son, standing at the podium he had just vacated. I didn't know what to say to her. How could I explain decades of subtle sabotage culminating in this moment? How could I explain that the man she loved, the man who had just credited his success to sons, had been actively trying to destroy one of them? I just held her gaze, a silent apology for the public spectacle, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible position she was in. She didn't speak, just nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes, and was gently led away by a concerned friend. Stepping down from the podium felt like stepping off a cliff. The air in the room felt different now, charged with the energy of a complete, unexpected paradigm shift. The man who was supposed to be the enduring symbol of the company was gone, replaced by the son everyone thought was being groomed for failure. The rest of the party was a blur. Handshakes, forced smiles, hushed conversations dying the moment I approached. Everyone was recalculating, adjusting their internal maps of power and influence. I was no longer the sun in the shadows. I was the sun, suddenly blindingly bright, casting long, new shadows of my own. The next morning, I walked into the CEO's office. My father's office. It felt wrong, yet inevitable. The air still held the faint scent of his cigar smoke, the lingering presence of the man who had occupied this space for so long. His massive mahogany desk was empty, cleared. There were boxes stacked neatly by the door, his personal effects already packed away, a hasty, ignominious departure. I sat in the big chair. The leather was cool beneath me. I looked out the window at the city skyline. His view. It was magnificent. And it was mine now. The victory was complete. I had survived his betrayal, navigated his obstacles, and turned his own game against him. He came for a celebration of his legacy and walked away with nothing but public humiliation and the cold, hard truth that his attempt to crush me had elevated me instead. The victim hadn't just escaped, he had taken the throne. But the satisfaction was colder than I expected. Yes, there was vindication. A deep, bone-weary sense that justice, in its own brutal way, had been served. But it was tainted. The taste of victory was bittersweet, sharp with the knowledge of what it had cost. The broken relationship with my father, the pain I had caused my mother, the end of a certain kind of innocence, a belief in family and shared purpose that was now shattered irrevocably. I had proven him wrong. I had won. I had the power, the position, the future he tried to deny me. But sitting there, in his chair, looking out his window, I felt a profound sense of isolation. The company was mine to lead, the legacy mine to shape. But the man who taught me about legacy, who first showed me this view, was gone, estranged, his image irrevocably altered. The war was over. I had won. But the battlefield was my own family, and the scars ran deep. I had the company, the career, the future, but I no longer had a father, not the one I grew up believing in. This view is magnificent, but sometimes, when the city lights begin to twinkle at dusk, I see his face there, reflected in the glass, frozen, blindsided, and the silence of this office, this victory, feels very, very loud. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever had to fight for something precious against someone who is supposed to be on your side, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life.